survivors battle an army of walkers.
Oh my God. Can't take them all on. This is my farm. I'll die here.
Hi everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of Geekfest Rants. Today we're going to do a little bit of a recap of where we're at with The Walking Dead. As I remember last time we tackled this subject, we got only a few episodes into the beginning of this season. We basically went from the attack on the road, the herding, into the farm, and I believe we got just as far as what happened between Shane and Otis. Last time we were here, it was also the post-Comic-Con time where we were all hyped up about the show and, we were awaiting the new season, and now we're about probably 3/4 or even more than 3/4 into this season. It's a short season. These shows only last about 12, 13 episodes apiece, and they usually split them into half and halves the way they've been doing them now. So they give you about half the episodes before Christmas and the other half right after Christmas. So we're coming up on the end of that second half of episodes. Joining me today, I have Steve Vivona and Steve Laux. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Let's talk zombies.
Now, let's start talking about how we feel about the season progressing so far as we have. I'll let Steve Vivona start a little bit.
Okay, well, I have, as you gentlemen are well aware, I've not been shy in talking about my disappointment with how the show has progressed in its second season.
Now, give us a little background. Are you a Walking Dead comic book person or not?
No,
and
I'm
are
not.
you comparing it to
No,
that?
I'm
Okay.
not. But I'm also speaking as someone who loved the first season and who was disappointed when Frank Darabont was let go. It kind of gave me a nervous feeling because I thought he was masterful in the first season. They've spent a great deal of time this season on the farm, which I think has really done a lot to harm the momentum of the show, first of all. And I feel as though, even though these last couple of episodes have sort of turned me around, I honestly was at the point of dropping the show. Oh. I'm sorry, I know that's like sinful because it's genre and all this other stuff, but I was getting more and more frustrated because to me, especially the first half of season 2, it felt like a soap opera. It felt melodramatic. It felt like, aside from the occasional zombie attack, which it was not that frequent. Again, I've said this in print to you guys, and I don't need the show explained to me, the premise of the show. I don't need to hear that it's not about the zombies. I know it's not about the zombies.
It's kind of like...
That's
Are
fine.
you referring to someone in
There's just
particular?
one person in particular who we know and love and will remain nameless.
Come on.
He's not going to hear it, Anthony.
Whenever I
Hey,
hear
he
that, whenever I hear
Go,
that,
Ant.
it reminds me of like a movie like The Naked Gun where they're at the Oscars and they're like, this is a show about the relationship of people set against the background of the zombie apocalypse.
You know what? That's good, great, and fun.
And I've been hearing that forever since the beginning of the show from the producers of the show and even from the writer of the show.
Which I'm cool with, but I just feel as though the zombies were completely relegated to just an occasional walk-on, 5-minute here thing. And maybe I wasn't getting my action quotient or my zombie quotient, but I felt as though the season 1 had a perfect mix of suspense, of drama, of zombies. And I felt like this season, it was like, the kind of crap that I was witnessing was like, I could just watch any melodrama that's on television, and that.
There was a lot of movement in the first season. A
Yeah,
lot of locations and a lot
Right.
of characters joining each other
And I understand that,
moving.
like, I remember going back to like something like Battlestar Galactica, the first season of that was incredible. And then it kind of dropped off after that, which is to be expected in a show that wants to have a certain longevity. Things are going to slow down. I know I'm ranting, but I got so frustrated by the, Shane, getting all
baby
gooey
and
over, Lori and, Rick and Rick's indecision and this and that. And then all the stuff with Herschel and all the philosophical stuff going back and forth. I mean, I get it. I get that, but it just seemed weighted too far on that side.
Okay, so, yes, I do agree with what Steve said about the frustration that has been evident with this seemingly, dog chasing the tail we just keep going over the same territory. It's the triad of Shane and Rick and Lori and blah, blah, blah. And, it almost seemed as if some of the same dialogue was being used, specifically between Shane and Dale, where they keep having the same conversation about, I know what you did and yada, yada, yada. I also had issues with the fact that not everyone, but how people are picking up on the fact that Shane was the reason for Otis's demise.
Magically.
How does Dale have this soothsaying ability to figure out, I know what you did and I know what kind of man you are. But that being said, we cannot fault them, meaning the people who create the show, 100%. Because the fact of the matter is, the reason that they've been on the farm for so long is because of budget cuts. Because they haven't been able to afford, as laughable as that might be, to shoot in various locations because AMC threw a ton of money at Mad Men. And other programs and other portions of the AMC empire took a hit, all the way down to, people losing their jobs who are working behind the scenes at AMC. So I'm resigned to chalking it up to that, especially now that it's starting to kick back into gear where we all kind of want it to go. You need to have that balance. It can't just be this melodrama that continues ad nauseum. Right. So,
well, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I mean, I know about the budget cuts, but I don't know for sure if it resulted
it did.
In them. Is that comedy fact?
Oh, absolutely.
Because when you compare it, and again, it's hard to compare it to the comic book because I started reading the comic book a couple months ago, and I stopped at a certain point where they're done dealing with the farm, and they're moving on into a major, if you want to call it, chapter of the story, where they're about to enter a new area that's very important in the mythology of this show, of this story. And from the beginning of the show, they've told us they were going to wander outside of the lines of the comic book.
Sure.
Right.
The problem is that you never know if one is the excuse for another. For example, did they mean to stay in the farm for this long? Or is it exactly like what Steve was saying? It's because of budget reasons that they couldn't visit a second major location this season, and they had to contain it into this location.
I mean, these people are professionals. The people who are creating this show, who develop these characters or writing the scripts, they know what they're doing. They know that they were boxed in and they had to create something from
do the best
not
they
nothing,
could.
But they had to create something with less.
The other thing is that Frank Darabont departure, even though he departed as we were starting the right before the show started, pretty much.
That was a real
they had
kick
already
in the stomach.
They had already shot and at least written the majority of the season. So I think that half the season was already shot and most of it was already written. So as far as the story goes, if you want to kind of blame it or use Darabont as an excuse for this is why it's different because he left the show, it might not necessarily be 100% true. It might be a little bit true, but not most of it. I think by the time you get to the third season, that's when you're going to really feel Darabont not being there, and you can either blame or credit the show depending on which direction it goes.
Wasn't the majority of the writing staff, though, fired prior to season 2 being shot?
Yes. They were working with a writing staff, but it was not a formal staff. It was a pool of freelance writers that they would bring in. So Darabont was crafting the major stories, and then they would come in and punch it up and vice versa.
There was also, the initial story was that Darabont walked in the room and killed everybody, basically. He emptied the room of writers and got them all fired. After he left the show, his version of the story is more like, we had a couple of writers and I got rid of a few of them. Not all of them, and these were not people that were like married to the show, but he kind of got rid of a few of them. So there's a discrepancy between stories, as there usually is. Who knows where the truth is? Yeah. Now, one interesting tidbit that I'm not sure if I mentioned last time was that Darabont had set what you can call an Easter egg, which we kind of mentioned before when we were doing one of our commentaries. If you remember the story in the first season where Rick goes into Atlanta, I think it is, and he's chased by these zombies, and he climbs inside a tank to hide from the zombies. And in the tank, a soldier who's a zombified soldier wakes up and goes after him, and he shoots him. That actor is a pretty well-known actor. I think his name is Sam Withers, which has done a lot of stuff on Clone Wars. He's appeared on tons of shows. He's the actor who did the Force Unleashed character in the video game. If you see his picture, you'll know him. Well, he purposely had him on to be that character, but didn't give him a credit because he was planning somewhere in the second season to do an episode, a standalone episode about a soldier that gets overrun in Atlanta.
Right.
And at the end of the episode, he just climbs into a tank and he's bitten and he turns and dies.
That sounds more like a webisode than an episode.
Yep. Yep, and apparently I've heard the actor give the interview that he's all mad because
Oh,
he never
that
got
sucks.
to do that because
Yeah.
Frank Darabont left before they could do that. But there was supposed to be a callback to the first season.
Well, and the other theory is that Darabont was asked to leave also because of these budgetary constraints that the production was under. They just simply could not afford to keep him on any longer.
It also
that in
sounds-
addition to his
Yeah, but
the
you know,
way that he works.
But it could also be one of those situations where, if this is what you're going to do to my show, I'm not going to be here for that kind of crap. He could have. It could have been one of
If
these
you're going to
standoffs.
slash my budget,
Right. Then you get rid of me
How can
because
I
I'm not
work?
going to stand here for. It could be
Yeah.
one of those deals because he hasn't gone out and given a clean
No.
version of his story. All you know right now is that it's all budgetary related. And at first they were giving you this whole thing about he hired a director and the studio was not happy with the outcome of the first 2 episodes or something like that, and
season 2 first
they
episode.
recut it, and it was all his fault for hiring this person, which sounded kind of murky.
I also find it hard to believe that I'm not sure how Walking Dead fares against Mad Men in ratings or Breaking Bad or these other AMC shows, but I know it crushes for cable. The ratings are just through the roof.
Yeah.
So the fact that they would slash the budget to me is
but
crazy.
but Mad Men is their linchpin.
Yes.
And because it has been on for so many years,
Yes.
I mean, the per episode budget is astronomical.
Yeah.
We talked about this before. Breaking Bad also suffers because even though they're about to start their final season, they were also forced, I think, to either lower the amount of episodes or slash their budget as they're exiting the
But when you
the show.
slash the budget of a show like Breaking Bad, it's not going to be that visually impaired.
In terms of locations
like
and
a Walking
that
Dead,
sort of
like
thing, yeah.
locations. A show like Walking Dead, which relies so much on its effects.
And it's an early show. They just started. They need that money to build up
and
their
the
base.
effects in Walking Dead are phenomenal. Let me ask you guys how you feel about the major plot points of season 2.
Well, the pregnancy is the first thing. They've gone back and forth with the pregnancy in terms of one person knows, 2 people know. She's
That
not
also
sure.
went on way too long.
Right. She's not sure whose kid it is. They don't know for sure whose kid it is. They're going to say it's their
They're
kid
gonna
no
say
matter
it's
what.
Rick no
They're
matter what.
ignoring the fact that, and I guess they can't test. They have no facilities to test. I mean, once the kid is born, do a blood test. I
If
guess
it looks like Shane or
if they
Rick,
could- who
that's the
knows?
best you're going to do.
And I don't want to read the comic because I don't want to find out if they ever find out or how they find out if they ever find out.
But I just felt that that probably more than any of the other
it took
plot
forever.
points was maudlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took forever and it was like enough. And with Shane and his seething and Rick and his,
But I will give them this. While the farmhouse act is going on way too long, it really is the transition for what's coming next.
yes. Yes.
Because what's happening is, while they changed a lot leading up to the farm, each and every character is changing even more so.
Yes.
While not being exposed to the apocalypse as much.
Right.
Which is,
It gives them a
that's
little- right,
what's
it gives them
most
a-
interesting
Yes.
to me.
Gives them a little breathing room. Let them rest for a bit.
Let them
kinda,
think, right. It's
and
like those
figure out what's
thoughts
going
try
on.
to
And
creep
what
in.
somebody I heard mention on TV in terms of Dale's
What?
departing.
Spoiler alert.
Well, no, I mean we're there already. We're past it.
Yeah.
Somebody might be watching it on DVD at some point.
Listen, if
Then don't be listening
you're
to
listening
this.
to the wrong show, if you
I'll also
wanna-
record
All
a
right,
special
and he was
spoiler.
eviscerated,
to
damn
get
it.
into this. While it's very different from what I understand than what they do in the comic, a lot of things in the comic take place earlier. A lot of
Yeah.
people depart the show earlier,
what I
leave
said,
early.
What I said off
back
mic,
and forth.
it follows the comic in a very oblique way.
Right. But the thing with Dale, from what I understand, is that what they might be trying to do is trying to represent that this is the last shred of
Decency.
the old humanity that
Yes.
people had.
Yes.
It's
So
a new world
Dale
now.
is symbolic
Dale
of that.
is symbolic of what was left behind. That no longer exists. They need a new system of ambiguous decision-making and morality to
Right.
get through. You can't go berserko crazy in the Shane way, but you also can't be super pacifistic in the Dale way.
Right.
And Rick is that guy in the middle who's supposed to dial it up for them.
Right.
And that's what I feel like it's setting up.
Yes, and I guess we're going to see a whole new world with the prison. That's
and,
coming.
And it's also because of Carl's involvement with the fact that Dale was killed by
The zombie that
by
he
a
was
zombie
terrorizing.
that he could have killed will set the stage for where his character is going to go.
What I've seen of Carl lately, he reminds me of a kid who is the way he was terrorizing that zombie. It reminded me of a kid who's like cruel to animals.
Killing ants.
Yeah, who was going to grow up to be a serial killer. Like he is really turning, despite his parents' best efforts. He's the first generation of that new morality.
It could be that.
I mean, it
Also-
could be. It's just
Right,
speculative.
but it could go either way. That's the problem. You're exposing children to these bizarre
Horrific.
roads that they could take. And in his particular case, it was a combination of just childhood stupidity, childhood curiosity, like you said, potential serial killer traits.
Yes.
And just basic stupidity. By now, you don't poke the bear.
No, you kill it.
You kill it or you get the hell away from it.
Right.
And talk about a lesson learned in
Oh,
terms of
God.
consequences of what happens when you...
see the look on his face when Dale died. Yeah. Any other Herschel? Again, too long with the Herschel, with the Rick and the Herschel.
Well,
arguing.
the whole Rick and the Herschel thing, the fact that he kept these people in the barn...
That to me was insane.
it
I had
was-
a hard time swallowing that.
Yeah.
It's hard
Even if his wife or whoever
well,
was in
it's hard
there.
enough to believe that he would do it, but that the rest of his family would kind of go along with him.
Yeah.
And it's like, was it a kind of like a religious thing that he honestly thought that someday these people would be cured?
No, I think not maybe not
And
religious,
you can't
but
kill
a
the innocent
hopefulness.
people.
Right.
You know, and
That
yes,
they're
they are innocent, but they're
and
contaminated.
maybe
you know.
a cure could be found for this quote unquote disease. Yeah, I guess because he's a medical person, maybe he thought that.
I also find it interesting that, in a way, one of the things he feared most, which is a paranoid type of trait in terms of the more people that come to my house, the more in danger that I am.
Yeah.
No matter how many well-meaning things they have. And you are talking about a group with, for the majority, well-meaning group, nice people. But just the fact that you have so many people there, it ruins everything.
Yeah.
In this particular world, you cannot control large groups of people in an area that is, I mean, granted, it's not overrun by zombies, and it's relatively
not
safe,
yet.
but it still falls apart. You have too many internal problems.
I just feel like these last few weeks, these last couple of episodes really rescued it for me because things started to happen. Things of consequence.
Could you
started
guys
to
predict
happen.
what happened to...
Sophia.
Oh, Sophia.
The Sophia thing.
No, that I saw a mile away. And I'm not saying like I'm like Mr. Genius or anything. I mean, I was like, she's a zombie, you know, come on. She's either out on the road somewhere or towards the very end, I said she's in the barn. You know,
Even though there was always the possibility that that's what would happen to her, that she would have gotten bitten somewhere. When I saw her coming out, it was like, I was more angry at first, but not angry at the writers, angry at the fate of what happened to this girl. I was like, God damn it, they've gotten this far, and now, damn it, it's all
But again,
down the tubes.
I feel like with Walking Dead, that's what's going to happen. I
Right.
mean, almost no one's coming to a happy ending here. How the hell is this show going to end?
Well-
you know, with a glimmer of hope, or is it going to be like our friend John Carpenter? You know, is it going to be
Well, that's the thing. If
the
this-
apocalypse is just going to
It's the
overrun?
nature of the show. Do you want to throw yourself in a show that odds are it's going to make
Well,
you
look-
angry and depressing, and it's just, or are
I
they
don't
going
know.
to give you something to hold on to?
I don't know. You know, that wouldn't bother me. You know, I think it's interesting. I had wanted to bring this up during one of our commentary sessions and I didn't, but I think it's safe to say, and I hope you guys, I don't know if you'll agree with this assessment or not, but I think as far as the three of us go in our tastes, I think we have always sort of gravitated, not to say that we like our New Hope and we like our Raiders and our, you know, stuff, but we also gravitate a little towards darker material. And I don't think that I would be necessarily crushed if the show ended on an unhappy note or
Not at
a
all.
somber note.
Not at all.
I can handle that. You know, I actually prefer the darker, complex material that, you know.
Oh yeah, but it's different in a TV show. When you go see a movie, you invest 2 hours,
Yes.
and you're okay with coming out feeling confused,
Yeah.
or feeling angry, or feeling happy. It's okay. I mean, traditionally, usually, you come out of a movie happy, and when you throw these different feelings,
Unless
in the
it's a
mix,
Carpenter film.
when you throw these different feelings in the mix, it's a welcome change.
Yeah.
But in a TV show, because it requires such a commitment, that it seems to be a bigger thing that they're asking us to do.
But with a show about zombies,
I mean, I'm not trashing it. I'm
no,
just saying.
I'm not trashing
that's
it
what-
either.
That's the commitment
I'm just
you're
saying,
signing
like,
up for.
I'm just figuring that there's no way in hell this show is going to end. I'm assuming it's going to end in a somber,
It's always the same.
downbeat way.
It's either downbeat, depressing, ambiguous.
ambiguous,
Or happy.
or they could give you a glimmer. They could give you a
throw you a
glimmer.
bone.
You know,
So, do we think that there is anything to a theory that says that Dale was killed because Jeffrey DeMunn is one of Darabon's guys?
I was thinking of that. Because those two are tight.
Yeah.
And he might have asked to be let go.
Wow.
Especially because he's dying now at the very, very end of the season, the post-Darabont
Right.
part. It's possible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I said before, it is not unusual for this show to not kill people when the comic book killed people.
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
They are
yeah. Oh,
now, spoiler
yeah.
alert, there is at least one character who should have died a while back already if you follow the
Yes.
comic. So this could have been the opposite of that. Let's get rid of somebody before people expect you to get rid
Yeah.
of them. You know, that kind of
Well,
thing.
I'm sure it's thrown the comic people right out of the, you know,
Yeah.
they don't know what the hell to expect.
All right, well, one last question from me. Where do we stand on Randall? can they trust him? Or the moment that
I think
something
only
happens,
Dale would trust him at this point. I think in this new world, they can't afford to trust him. But if they're leaving, the whole danger they're in now that they're trying to figure out is the fact that because he seems to know about the farm, because he apparently grew up there or knows somebody who knows somebody, that they're afraid they're going to be found out because of that.
Yeah, he knows who Maggie is.
And if we know for a fact, the audience knows, which I don't know if it's a spoilery type of thing, to know that they're going to go somewhere else next.
Yes.
In theory, you could say, well, if they're going somewhere else, they could just leave him there and tie him up and, I don't know, let him...
You know what I will say on the positive side?
Drive away, who cares?
I do like the tension between Shane and Rick, to me, is sort of reminiscent of the tension between Jack and Locke. The way, they're both trying to be the leader. They both think their way is the way to go. And I do like the way that that's played out in the show, even if it maybe is a little drawn out. But I have to say that I like Rick as a character. I think he's a very complex guy. He's thrust into this leadership role. And I find with each episode, it seems there's a new story arc there. Is he going to kill this guy? Is he not going to kill this guy? It's up to him. Shane has his idea of it. And I just think that the tension between the two of them drives the show for now.
The other thing I noticed, going back to the Randall situation, the fact that when he was trying to get out of the barn, when Rick's kid was there, he was trying to talk him into it. And the type of things he was saying, they were like, wait a minute, this guy might be a little shady.
That's
he's
what kind of
saying just
off.
about anything to get out of there. And he's trying to trick the kids. So
Right, you want to come with me.
Yeah, it sounded weird.
Well, wouldn't you?
Of course, you would. You could say, they're about to kill you. You're going to say anything to get out of there.
Any possible...
But if you're trying to paint a picture to the audience that they're about to make a big mistake by killing an innocent, you don't give them that little morsel of ambiguity to make it, to give you
That he's
doubt to his
deceptive.
character.
Right.
Right. Okay, well, we'll see what happens next. All right, so we finally had a chance to watch the last 2 episodes of season 2. Steve, tell me a little bit about, without getting specific yet, because we are going to get specific, but tell me a little bit about how did those 2 shows make you feel when it comes to the remainder of the season that I know you were kind of iffy about?
I have to say, these last 2 episodes completely redeemed the show, the whole season, in my opinion. So much finally happened that was really important and dramatic. It felt like so much of the season had been just filling space, and wasting time. Now we had really incredible stuff going on.
As I mentioned before, I hadn't fallen off the wagon as much as you had, but it really amped things up. You almost got this feeling that, if the show was operating at level 5, all of a sudden they went to like level 9 in the last 2 episodes. They really amped it up. Now,
yeah, definitely.
Granted, I'm not a big comic book person, as I always say this, but as I've also have said in the past, I did buy the compendium, which is a combination of I don't know how many volumes of the comic, and I had started reading them a couple months ago because I was kind of like, you read the book after you watch the movie type, and I wanted to get that experience. So I started reading it, and I started slowing down because I noticed, okay, we're introducing the characters, the guy, some of them are traveling, they're making these stops along the way, and they finally reach the farm, all the adventures at the farm, and then they moved on to the next phase, and that's where I stopped because I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta stop because I'm getting ahead of myself. And yes, there are major differences all along the way, and that's what they told us from the beginning. They're gonna mix it up a little bit. And at the farm, by the time we get to the farm, some of these characters that we like or really dislike are no longer around, and some of these characters are still around. So you can't follow the comic book in terms of knowing what's going to happen exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess for, plot-wise, like major plot-wise, you do have to follow it because there are certain markers along the way of this story that you got to hit. And so far, we've hit, the main 2 markers being the introduction, getting back with the group, and arriving at the farm. Now, let's start getting into a little bit of the details of what happened on these last 2 episodes. For the entire, 2 seasons of the show, specifically this last season, when we found out that Rick's wife is pregnant, it's always been this, whose baby is it? Nobody really knows whose baby it is. They're going to assume it's Rick's, whether they like it or not. Shane is losing his mind along the way, and it all kind of came to an end at this second to last episode. Tell me a little about how the Shane confrontation took place.
Well, it's funny because I wasn't completely aware of Shane's fate. I hadn't read the comic, but I think we referenced this prior, but AMC had let the cat out of the bag saying on like a DVD sell sheet that, Shane's fate, so.
Oh, the big.
Yeah, that was the big goof that they let it slip.
It's funny because I didn't read the goof, but I knew it because I had read the comic up to that point.
Right.
And they had done this way earlier.
Right. And friends of mine who read the comic had clued me into that. But yeah, that was the big goof that AMC made. Now, I kind of thought, I had a little inkling that maybe Rick and Shane had resolved their differences when they had that big knockdown, drag-out fight. I said, well, maybe this is, all right, Rick is establishing himself and he kicked Shane's ass and, he's like, I'm in charge and this and that. But you got the sense pretty early on in that episode that Shane was going to do him in, that he had it. And they bring Shane, sets up this elaborate plan to kill Rick.
And it took, if you think about it, it's a few episodes of a plan because to let Randall loose in order to be able to chase him and to catch him and to kill, it's pretty elaborate.
Right. Like you say, he sets up this whole elaborate device to get Rick alone. And when they finally are alone, it's probably, for me, the most dramatic moment of the series.
Because it wasn't a clean plan in terms of, okay, I'm going to bring you here and I'm going to put a bullet on your head. He was still conflicted.
Yes.
And obviously, Rick was more conflicted, but Shane was still kind of like, you get the feeling that in a way he's bringing him out there so that Rick has a chance to kill him.
Right. I almost got that sense. And had I not known, had I not read the spoiler, up until the minute it actually happened, I wasn't sure if Rick was going to do it. If Rick was going to kill him, because he was going on and on and on about, we can come back from this, nothing has been happened yet that can't be changed. And then at the very last minute, he stabs him.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, he didn't even shoot, because he let his gun down and then, he stabbed him and he was conflicted, but at that last second, he had just completely had it with him.
At some point, he decided, and that's, I think, part of the arc of this character. And it's part of the arc of all the characters. When Dale died, symbolically, I think, who, ironically, also, Dale did not die in the comic, at least not now, which was a complete shocker. But when Dale died, it symbolized the end of the humanity, meaning the end of how civilization works today for me and you. Dale is dead. There is no more moral voice. There is no little angel in people's shoulder anymore. It's a new world where, you're good and you're bad. It's a very gray, darker gray area. And that is a decision I think Rick has made at this point, is that his whole point in life is his family. Keep them alive no matter what. And that's what you're talking about, I think, that it almost looked like he was convincing him, maybe. He could have died any second now. But he made a choice at one point. He's like, enough of this. I can't ride the line anymore with Shane. He's got to go now, and that's what happened.
Right. He had to cross that line, and that, I think, forever changes him.
Yes. Now, it's funny because when he's handing Shane the gun and he's stretching his arm to him and the gun is in reverse, he's holding it upside down. I thought he was going to somehow pull the trigger on an upside down gun with his pinky or something. And I'm like, but I completely forgot he had a knife in him and he wanted to get him close enough to stab him.
Right. Having read the comic, did Shane come back as a zombie in the comic after he was killed?
I don't think so. I think from what I remember, if I'm remembering it right, it was a similar situation where he's out in the woods with Rick and the intent is to bring Rick out to kill him.
Right.
And it seemed not as conflicted as it did on the show. It was more of a straight, cold kill that was going to happen. And at the last second, somehow Carl shoots Shane. Not zombie Shane. Live Shane. You got to keep in mind also that in the comic, as far as I know, the CDC storyline was never there. They created that for the TV show.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And in the comic, I don't know about the future of the comic because I'm only very slightly into it. I don't know how they deal with the matter of the dead come back to life no matter what.
Right.
Which is something that you might want to mention that we found out.
Yeah. As soon as Shane dies, he wakes up as a zombie and Carl puts him down.
Right, and we've had hints of this before because a couple of previous episodes, they did mention something about they found these 2 security guards that were zombies, but they didn't find any bite marks on them at all.
Right.
And they were like, what
Right.
happened to these guys?
Yeah, there was no sign of any sort of trauma.
Right, so who knows how those 2 died. And I guess it was supposed to be a little clue of something.
Right.
Now, it's interesting because, yes, it is a big reveal if you think about it, as far as this particular story goes. And it was the thing that was whispered into his head. But what's interesting about it is that if you follow any type of these zombie stories that we do, the zombie films, the Romero films, all that stuff,
Right.
the regular dead coming back to life is no strange thing for us, right?
Right, exactly. Here's a point that I want to make, and I believe this is true in the comic. They're not making any sort of attempt to identify how this all happened.
Correct.
And I find that interesting. And that's actually, to be honest with you, I mean, I know it's not integral to the show necessarily, but I would kind of like to know the ins and outs of what happened and how it happened. And yeah, I mean, it was cool that this reveal of when you die, you come back as a zombie. I mean, that was a great, sort of a shocking moment, but I would really like to know how it all came to pass. And it doesn't seem like they're gonna ever do that. I think the comic is up to something like they're in the 90s.
Yeah, you're right.
And they've said, no, that's not important. Okay. But yeah, you talk about the other zombie films and, it's like vampires. They all kind of make it up. They take what they want from prior efforts, and then they'll be like, well, no, we don't like this. And some vampire movies, they can walk around in the day, blah blah blah. With the zombies, it's I guess you can do the same thing. You can pick and choose what you want in terms of their
mythology. They create
mythology.
Their own.
Yeah.
Well, the other interesting thing is in the show, obviously, because you're ending the season, what I like to call red shirts, from our Star Trek days, they've eliminated a couple of more of Herschel's farmhands' relatives as they are leaving the farm. We lost at least, I think, 2 characters that are kind of minor characters. I couldn't even tell you what their names were because they're kind of background characters. Herschel, from what I understand, is a character they were going to get rid of earlier, I think, or at least at this point, but they kept him because they kind of like the character, which is good. He's a good actor. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But the big reveals of the show was also the fact that Andrea gets separated from the group as the zombie horde is coming towards them. Another thing about this particular horde that's coming, it's funny how they showed you on the show that it all started in Atlanta.
Yes.
It's in Georgia, that in the city that they see the helicopter, possibly a similar helicopter that Rick saw in the earlier episodes when he first reaches the city, that people were thinking he's just out of his mind.
Right.
One of them sees it. They starts following in that direction. The rest of them start doing the same thing. And next thing you know, you have a whole bunch of them coming towards you.
Right.
I mean, we always kind of knew that the only reason the farm is allowed to exist the way it does is because they haven't found it yet. Because there is no protection there. A couple of barbed wire fences is not going to do jack squat.
Right. Exactly.
So when they finally come, yeah, of course it's going to be a bloodbath because there's nothing really to protect them. It's like having speed bumps basically in the grass because these things are not going to stop no matter what.
Right, yeah.
So as everybody is leaving the farm and just escaping in different directions, really, they all get separated and they eventually all finally get into some kind of vehicle and start driving in some direction, except for Andrea. She gets kind of separated, left behind kind of deal, and they're not sure if she's alive or dead. They don't just leave her, but she ends up running through the woods. And one of the big teases for next season that we get is that she's fighting a couple of these zombies, and then she starts to get overrun by one of them, and just as she's about to get bitten, I guess, somebody slices the head off of the zombie.
Yes.
And you look at, they give you a shot of who this person is, and all you see is what could be a woman. We're not sure because it's kind of like a skinny kind of person wearing like a trench coat thing, a hood over the head. You can't see the face. But what's completely psychotically crazy is that behind this person, there's 2 zombies with no arms being like led around in chains by this person.
Right.
It was like, what the hell just happened?
Just that visual. I mean, for anybody who is not familiar with the comic, I mean, it just must have blown them away.
Yeah, and because I haven't touched the comic in a while, I don't know if I remember if we've gotten to that point yet, but it's just, you spend more time trying to figure out, what does that mean? Forget the fact that there's a person there with a sword. Okay, fine, I get that. That makes sense. What are those zombies with no arms? And how is she controlling them and keeping them from eating her.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me. It's one of these. It's a tease, basically. It's a gigantic tease.
Definitely. From everything I was reading in forums and stuff online, that the biggest thing that people were dying to see was the introduction of Michonne.
It's supposed to be a huge character.
This was it.
Yeah. The person that I usually talk to about the show who has read the comics, she is gigantic in this comic in terms of how big of a character this is.
Right.
The other big thing that they reveal, which we kind of, at least I kind of knew was coming, not just because of the fact that I read the comic and I stopped the second I saw this, but on the internet, they started to reveal that they've hired an actor who apparently, I think, Steve, you mentioned he might have done a spot on Doctor Who.
Yes, David Morrissey, a great British actor who's done tons of stuff over there, and he did one of the Doctor Who Christmas specials.
Right. And he apparently is going to be playing the governor, which, again, it's a major baddie in this particular franchise. Mm-hmm. Now, the Michonne character, technically, we didn't know at the time who was playing her because they never showed you her face. So it could have been any actor in there. But they did announce after the show aired, they hired an actress. I forget her name. She's somebody, I think, who appeared in HBO's Trem, I think it's the name of the series. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pretty unknown actress. They kind of keep the show to unknowns, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But the reveal at the end is that they're very close because they're hearing something, and they're very close to the prison, from this particular part of the story.
Yeah.
And that's basically how they ended it.
Yeah.
It's, again, a gigantic tease. Andrea's in the woods with Michonne. The rest of the group regroups, and
there's actually one thing I want to talk about briefly, and that happens in the last few minutes of the show, and that's the reaction that Laurie has to Rick's killing of Shane.
Yeah.
That, I got to tell you, that bothered me because I don't find Laurie to be a very likable character anyway. And I thought that she was pushing Rick to this.
Oh, yeah.
And now the fact that he's actually done it and she had this look of horror and disgust, I couldn't be sure if she was more upset that Carl put him down or that Rick killed him in the first place.
I like to think that her reaction was more the fact that Carl had to get involved in the death of Shane. It makes no sense for her to be upset that Rick killed him. I mean, 1 or 2 episodes before, she's basically whispering in his ear, you got to do something about this guy. It was very clear that she's telling him to get rid of him.
Right.
And obviously she didn't see all the chances that he gave him.
Exactly. And he's trying to make that very clear to her. And she's just totally horrified.
Yeah. That was a little unnerving.
Yeah. And that, more than anything, I think is what finally sent Rick over the edge.
Oh, yeah.
Because that speech he makes at the end of the episode was just, I thought it was great, but you could just see the change in him.
Yeah. It's like, if you want me here, I'm in charge. If you don't want me here, get the hell out.
Yeah, well, find somebody else.
Right.
I love the line, this is not a democracy.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's kind of part of the Dale thing. It's no longer, what do you guys think we should do? Let's vote on it. No, this isn't Survivor. This is something else.
Exactly.
And that's pretty much how they wrapped up the season, which, I mean, again, I'm happy with it. The whole season had an aura around it because of the fact that Darabont had departed the show.
Yes.
And it is possible that what we saw on the second half of the season had a lot to do with Darabont's leaving the show. But, I mean, I'm still happy with the quality of the show. I believe the fact that you have Kirkman more involved than before could make up a little bit about, that. But I know that part of the inception of the show was to go off track every now and then, bringing things that are not directly out of Kirkman's brain. And that is the type of things I hope they continue to do, especially for the people that are into the comic. I mean, I don't consider myself to be a comic person, but I'm sure, 75% of the people watching this show are comic book people that are following the show because they love the comics so much. And the only way you can keep them in suspense is to throw in,
switch it up.
Fastballs here and there where you're like, what the hell that just happened? What is that?
Exactly. No, I agree.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'd like to thank Steve for chiming in on our Walking Dead Season 2 recap. On behalf of everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you here next time on Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Stop.